Hey everybody, Eric here. I am putting the finishing touches on the episode you're about to listen to. I've been up all night, if I'm being honest, trying to get this done. And after listening to the whole episode, I felt that it was necessary to put a trigger warning at the beginning. Towards the last third of the episode, we get into some heavier, more mature topics and how to handle them, how others have handled them, and some procedures that have emerged in the community about a way to make sure that everybody at your table feels welcome and nobody is feeling uncomfortable. That's the last thing we want at our table, at least. So we really hope you enjoy this episode. I'm very proud of it. And let us know what you think. Stay sweaty.
Philomythia Podcast.
I always say
This
welcome.
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 This is an episode we're not going to say the number of. This is
anymore.
Welcome to our current episode of the week.
The one that
It's
we
a weekly
recorded
episode.
today. So, I have a question for you, Eric, real quick, that I thought of earlier, and I was like, I'm going to ask him that on the podcast.
Hey, guess what? I have an answer for you real quick.
So
probably, maybe.
Since you're the one that that always mixes and messes with the audio, have you ever just listened to just your track for a while?
Yep.
Or just my track for a while?
Yep.
And you're like, this sounds so weird hearing a one-sided version of the conversation. You're like, huh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I put our tracks together, for listeners who don't know, nobody probably cares about this, but I'm going to say it anyways because this is our soapbox. I'll have to isolate tracks because sometimes noise will come up or like there's a weird sound. I'm like, okay, whose track is that coming from? So yeah, I constantly have to isolate and listen to things. I haven't listened to a whole episode one-sided.
Oh, that would be crazy.
But it's really hard to get the context sometimes where you're like listening, you're like, wait, I'm only listening to one track of this one side of the conversation. I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Because sometimes it might be like me going, oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Like, what do you get? I don't understand. What are you talking about? Oh, maybe I should turn on track 2. There's Ian.
Okay, that's what we're talking about.
Oh, he's talking about how much he hates goblins.
Oh, yeah.
Something. So, yeah.
So we've had a few people now talking to us online, and that's been cool. So thanks, you guys. If you guys be listening,
props to you guys. Yeah,
love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into not really a subject, but just kind of how we kind of open these things and we talk about ourselves for a second about what our gaming experiences have been lately. So last night I DM'd for my first time for my group in quite a while now in this brand new section of a campaign that I'm running for these guys. And it's the full-time campaign now.
The full Monty.
Yeah. And I was real nervous about it because I've put a lot into this section of the game that we're calling Act 2. And I was super nervous to see these characters start to explore who they were, because I created everyone's character as a foundation and let them color it in however they wanted to. And Eric's colored his guy in wonderfully, and everybody's starting to like color their characters in, and it's so funny to see the characters develop in front of you. You're like, oh my god, because I didn't anticipate their personalities really to be that way. But it's perfect. Like, it's like, wow, that fits. So fits.
Right.
Yeah, it's super nerve-wracking. Was very nervous.
For sure.
It took me a minute to like really get into the flow. And we have one character, and I'm sure there's always one in everyone's campaign that is just driving to mess with like crazy shit. You're like, what are you doing?
They're fixing.
And
They're fixing for a tangle.
Yeah, they want to do something wild. Like,
Yeah.
they're like, let's just jump to the end then. And you're like, try. I mean, it's almost like that thing on Chrono Trigger when you get to the end of time and there's the bucket, and if you use it, it takes you right to the Lavos battle.
Oh, you can just jump right to the
right
end.
To the end. Like right when you get to the end of time where your characters are like level 15, maybe. They're like, oh, you could go fight Lavos right now. Sure. Here you go. It's like, what?
Right.
And people like this person, and let's just call him out because he's a hardcore gamer and he does hardcore shit. It's Jerry. He is.
Plus, he did our music, and he's going to be on the show soon, so we'll just give him some shit right now.
He loves to get crazy in campaigns. Like lately, his characters act out wildly. Mm-hmm. But lucky for me, I had mostly prepared for him acting super crazy, but then he did something. I was like, what?
Right.
I don't even know what to do about that. All right, we'll let him. Regardless, had a wonderful time. Once it started flowing really well.
It was cool.
Once they got to like that the little state, like the little hit, like the camp kind of
waypoint.
Yeah, the waypoint. When they got there and shit was going down, I loved seeing everyone's reaction when I would kill one of the village people. How everyone was like, no, fuck.
Right.
They were all, everyone wanted to save them. And I was like, oh, sweet. They're invested a little bit in the goodness of people. And then I sunk my fangs into Eric. It was great.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, my character specifically, because of just, I took your initial concept and then gave him a backstory. And so I don't usually play characters that are more like justice oriented and care about people, but this is that character,
right?
Where he's always making sure things are fair. He cooks meals for everybody, and like it's ridiculous, but it's awesome. But I like him. It's funny. His character has turned out to be like he cares, but he's also kind of awkward. So like one of the characters, they keep walking around naked and stuff, and he'll my character's name is Vash. He'll look at the ceiling. He's like, oh. So anytime there's like awkwardness, he's totally like that teenager type of character. It's fun. I
was confused for a second. I was like, naked. Oh yeah, because you guys
know what I'm talking about.
Well, you guys got crazy and wanted to wash off all the weird sporty stuff in the river.
Right. Yeah.
I spaced that. Anyway, yeah, it was a great time. Also super nerve-wracking. But I felt like the players enjoyed themselves. And
yeah, it was fun.
I'm excited again.
That's pretty much DMing. It was a great time, but it was also nerve-wracking.
Oh,
it's pretty much always DMing. Like, I was stressed, but I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was super fun watching the players, and really like, because there was still like things I'd forget that I wanted to do or something like this. And in those heats of the moment, while you're in game with your players, being actively there, sometimes stuff that you planned may fall by the wayside, and you may be like, oh shit, I forgot to do that.
Right.
That's okay. If you can figure out a way to bring it up later if you need, you can find a way to sneak it in there, because I think what's really important, and I think, maybe you'll agree and disagree, I don't know. When you're engaged with the players and it's a flow, like things are moving, don't break it to try and include some detail that you think needs to be there. Keep going. You can include that at a later session. Don't break flow.
Yeah, the players aren't going to know. They don't know what your plan is, and
right.
I've never regretted, because I think that's probably a common experience for DMs, is where, I have A, B, and C that I want to make sure I hit. Like, or they need this information. Shit, I forgot about C. I've never regretted holding off and giving them C the next session.
Right.
or later on, or fitting it later on, down the line in the same session or a couple sessions later. That's never been something where I'm like, if only I had given them clue number C. Oh no.
Right. Well, so, especially when you're engaged and like the players are eating it up and you're dishing it and everyone's enjoying it. It's like, okay, here we go. And I felt like hitting that stride was like right when you heard, like right when the scream started. I feel like everyone snapped into it and they're like, oh shit. What?
Right.
And then it went on, and don't get me wrong, I had a blast dealing with all of the tomfoolery of the attack on the school. Like I was, it made sense. Like it wasn't like out of character or out of context. Everything everyone was doing, I was like, yeah, I think this stuff makes sense.
Yeah.
And regardless of what people's characters think doesn't make sense, your children, they're not going to let you talk to the headmaster right now.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Right. I think on top of that, some of it too is just that there's these characters that are already you've made. And so a lot of the first couple of sessions from this point on is us learning, oh, here's what my character knows. Right. Oh, here's the conventions. Here's the social conventions of the school. Like, oh, you don't just go talk to the headmaster.
Right.
When you have a question. That's just, you don't just go ring up the president when you're upset about your water not working. That's it's just not done. Right. You could, but you're probably not going to get in contact with them.
Right.
Yeah. You're not going to get very far. So some of it is like, oh, that's how this culture works. That's how the culture of the school works, Right. So some of it is us figuring out, oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, that's not how that works.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
Now let's moving on now. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's moving on.
Right. But it was a lot of fun. Anyway.
It was fun for sure.
Yeah. I'm super stoked for the next session, which I don't even know if there is. I don't know if we're playing next Friday. It's the day after Thanksgiving. I mean, we did last time.
I think we did Saturday last time. We did a day later. I'm down to play. I mean, if people don't want to do the regular thing, I say we just do some blades.
Right. I'm totally into that. 100%.
Yeah.
And if
play something,
I'm saying that if at least 2 players show up, I'm down to work through the problems you guys are in on mine. Because you could. The problems you're encountering right now, you could deal with 2 to 3 people right now.
And with the, because my character's grandma is like sick and we have to go gather like herbs and different things out in the surrounding countryside. So yeah, that makes sense. Like my character really wants somebody to stay with grandma.
Oh, okay.
While we go. Like he doesn't want her to be left alone, which to me makes perfect sense. It's like, yeah, of course. But yeah, we'll play something.
Yeah, we'll do something. Ain't no thing. But let's. We're listeners. We have listeners apparently. Hello, welcome.
We have some. Maybe in the future we'll have more. Who knows?
Hey, my name's Ian.
This is Eric.
To identify our voices, because we sound so similar.
We sound so similar.
We talk. Everything we do is the same.
Whatever. Ian has the sexy, low bass voice, and I have the squeaky,
That's not how I hear it. And how I hear my voice is not a low bassy voice at all. Honestly, it's in my head. It sounds. You
focus on the nasal.
That's right. It's all in my nose, and I hear nothing but that.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of things, and I actually meant to talk to you about this before we recorded, but now that we're here, I think this is a fun thing we can talk about real quick. You bought a game recently, and I was like, man, I want a hard game. I want to play a game that seems cool. I know that this game got like rave reviews. Oh, it's a little discounted right now. So I bought Hades,
it is.
Man.
Yeah, it's fun.
Holy shit. It's fucking really love it.
Yeah. It's hard because it's like old school where if you die,
Yeah.
You just get sent back to the start. And I think the dungeon rooms in that, because for listeners who don't know, it's really like again, I'm a music teacher for those who haven't listened. If this is your first episode listening,
This
welcome.
is your first time at Philomythia. You have to play.
Yeah, you have to play. Exactly. But the music is really good.
Oh, I was
The
just
guy who there's a song in 11 that I've taught, and like there's some complex stuff going on, and they have a cool tonal palette. There's like some weird different instruments in there, and the art direction is amazing. The voice acting
the
is
voice
great.
acting is unreal. It's,
really good.
It's so good. Like instantly, as soon as the game started, I was like, "Oh, what's up now? Okay,
Yeah.
I am
Yeah,
into
it's cool.
this. You got me.
Yeah.
I like it." And then like, I'm already upgrading things. I'm like, it grabs you instantly. It's like, "Hey, here's a bunch of shiny stuff." And it's hard. And I'm like, holy shit, it is hard.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's this is totally tangential, and it's not going to make sense for a few moments. So bear with me, listeners. There's another tabletop RPG called Numenera.
Oh,
and it uses a cipher system, which Ian finally took my advice and started reading it. And he's like, oh yeah, this looks legit. It's different than D&D, but Monty Cook is kind of the creator of it and the creator of the cipher system, which is the mechanics. And he's like a D&D veteran. So he was heavily involved in D&D 3.5, and he's one of the creators of Planescape, which is one of the best settings for D&D. It's very philosophical and different. But it almost feels like the power-ups you get from the gods, because you're trying to escape from Hades. You're the son of Hades, and you're trying to escape that realm and go to Olympus. So all the other gods will kind of sneak in and send you messages and give you power-ups just for a little bit. And it reminds me of the one-use magic items where you get this cool thing, but only until you die. Because you're going to die a lot, and you're going to go back to the start, and then you have to
do it again,
explore your way again. And I think each time you go, the dungeons are modular, so it's procedurally generated. Yeah. You're like, oh, I don't remember this place. It looks kind of similar.
I love it. The story it's simple, but it's fully engaging. You're like, oh shit, I love. But
you know what the goal is? You're like, oh, I have to escape.
Yeah. And
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And like everything's based on escape. It's like sneak out this way's out the window. You're like, out the window.
Have you gotten I love the spear. Have you purchased the spear yet?
Not yet.
For the weapon? Oh, it's really good. It's a good one. It's a little slower, but man, it does good damage. It's really awesome.
Nice. It's a fantastic game, man.
I love the skeleton dude in your next to your room. You have the little arena where you leave, and the little skeleton guy that you can just beat up.
Oh, I haven't seen. I've been to my room, but I haven't seen that spot.
Oh, when you exit your room to choose your weapons and stuff, there's a little dude that pops up like a little minion. He's like, and you can try out
weapons,
your
and
powers
stuff on
and
him.
weapons on him.
Oh,
and
okay.
You can kill him. He has a health bar, but then he just comes right back.
Oh, that's sick.
Because you're in. Yeah.
Super
it's really good.
Super great game.
And full disclosure, I learned about it like a year ago.
Oh yeah, me too. I've known about it from my favorite. Yeah. Y'all might not know this. I don't even know if I've talked about it. Oh, we've talked about it a little. I play guitar. It's like music's one of my number one loves. I love playing. But I actually learned about Hades from a guitar player that I like named Ollie Steele. He talked about it about a year ago and was just raving about it.
Oh, I learned about it from Matthew Mercer.
Oh, really?
One of the few times I checked Twitter, his tweet came up and it just dropped, and he's like, this game is amazing. And he's like, voice acting amazing, play amazing. I was like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. Like, it seems interesting. And then I looked at it, I was like, this looks really cool, but I'm not paying full price for it right now.
Right.
I'm going to wait. You know? So
$5 off, baby. Well, you guys, it's
who
probably
knows
not $5
when this
anymore,
drops.
but
Yeah,
it was.
hopefully it'll be on sale again. But, yeah, if you like kind of Diablo style, as far as you're seeing, they call it God view. So you're seeing your little character kind of move through the map isometrically. So you're not completely like bird's eye view. You're kind of at an angle. If you like those kind of games, Hades is cool.
Yeah,
it's definitely worth checking out. Yeah.
Sure. Also, I've been, I'm going to give a shout out to a story situation here. Hideo Kojima, however you want to say it, the guy who does Metal Gear and all that. I downloaded Zone of the Enders, the second runner, which is also one of his games. But the other night I was like trying to sleep and I couldn't sleep very well. So I was like, oh, I'll read then. And I usually use just my tablet to read. And so I started reading Metal Gear, Guns of the Patriots. And I only had the sample of it, and I read all the way through the sample, bought the book, and I read for like an hour and a half, dude, just sucked in to this book that basically it's a description as if you played the video game Metal Gear Guns of the Patriots. It's unreal how much it flows as if you were playing the game.
Nice.
So good. The story, I love Hideo Kojima is one of my favorites. And apparently one of Eric's favorite authors is also one of my favorite authors' favorite authors. So now I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to check that out now. So those books that you talked about are top priority after Emperor's Blades.
China Mieville.
Yep.
I highly, highly, highly recommend not starting with City in the City.
Okay.
Because the language is really dense. He's you could call him literary because his vocabulary is high. It's lots of words in there. And the City in the City is kind of like a Clockwork Orange, where there's like a lingo that doesn't exist in the real world. So there's a lot of getting used to European sounding words that only exist in this book.
Okay.
It's good. It's a good book, don't get me wrong, but that one is a tough one to start with. And he's tough anyways. The payoff is amazing, but getting into it, you're like, what the hell?
Right.
Perdido Street Station's great. Embassy Town is great. Those are good places to start. Do what you want.
Right.
Just giving you as a fan and a big fan of his. And that's, I think I said it already, but China Mieville is the author we're talking about.
Yeah.
Super. If you love weird stories or anything kind of more out there, he's one to check out for sure.
Well, and when we've talked about, I don't know if it was on the podcast or if it was in a private conversation where you were like surprised that I hadn't like gotten into that, especially because I love that Metal Gear, that type of story. You're like, that's so up your alley, man. Like you would love it. And I'm like, when I hear about it, I'm like, would I though? And now more and more, Eric is pretty good at knowing things that he's like, Ian will like this. I'm fucking sure of it. Yep, and so far he's been right. I'm almost done with Emperor's Blades, and it is the very first book in that book, The Unhewn Throne, I believe. Yeah,
Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne is the official title of the trilogy.
Right.
I just call it the Emperor's Blades trilogy because it's easier to say.
Right. And it is, I don't even know how to describe it because I didn't know what to expect reading these books. And now I'm at the end of book 1, and I feel like my journey's just begun in these.
Oh, it has.
Like, even though I've already experienced so much, I'm like, I feel like this is just like the tip of the iceberg for the arc that I'm about to experience. And even this little bit, I'm sucked in now. Like, I'm like, I'm invested in those two, the brothers. I'm like totally invested in those two characters so much. I'm like, I love them. Like their personalities are so good. And I'm like, again, let's tie this to a RPG thing. You've talked about this briefly with me off the podcast, but creating like some sort of campaign where you're that group that the wing, right? Where
you play. So there, for people who don't know, there are these soldiers called Ketrel, and they're basically like Navy SEALs. They train from the time they're like 8, kind of similar to Ender's Game in that way. Like you go start training when you're really young. And you train until you're about 21. And by the time you're done, you're like the baddest warrior in the land. But here's the twist. That's cool. They ride these giant hawks, which are called Ketrel. So that's where they get their name from. They worship the god of darkness. There's some other things we won't talk about, but they have special powers that they get only the initiated know about. They can see in the dark. Their senses are heightened. But man, the way it's written, because it's like a 5-man unit, one person flies the hawk, and that's their specialty. One's a demolition expert, one's the leader, one's like an expert archer. So they all have specialties.
Right. And they all ride
that's like
the
a
one
perfect
bird.
one bird.
Right. That's what I was like blown away by. I was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, it's a huge bird. And they're all like these, oh, it's so crazy.
And so you got the one guy riding the bird, but the other 4 are stuck to the bird's legs.
Yeah.
Strapped on, holding on for dear life. And there's a whole section about them trying to refine their drops, because basically the bird will dive when they're on a mission, and they're trying to get off as fast as possible from the bird to do whatever and then launch back up.
Right.
So it's a perfect D&D kind of premise.
Oh, yeah.
You're the special unit and shit goes wrong.
Yeah. And it would fit using like Blades in the Dark, like some sort of
totally.
Forged in the Dark rule set.
Yeah, Forged in the Dark. Yeah.
Well, because their drops are all based on dropping their equipment that they may need within those barrels.
Barrel drops, yeah.
And then, oh man, yeah. So you could do so much with that kind of D&D thing, and having the specialized people.
It's really, really cool concept. Yeah. Naturally lends itself to a party of some kind.
Oh yeah, so much.
Sure.
And then the unique things within the world are like the leech and all of these special
the leeches.
things.
Yeah. Again, for people who haven't read the books, you really should.
They're really cool.
They're really good. They're well written. One thing that I'm partial to are authors, or rather I'll say I started discovering that I liked authors who went to school for poetry. So the author, Brian Stavley, actually has, I think, a master's in poetry.
Oh, wow.
So his use of language is really to my liking. It's a little more flowery. It's a little more literary.
It's cool.
Vocabulary is bigger. But then the world is so... To me, it almost feels like he took like Russia and China as kind of the flavor rather than Europe. Because it's almost there's kind of a fantasy Buddhism in there. And
for sure.
But then it's just got this hard kind of grim, dark twist. So consequences are bad in this world.
Highly recommend them.
I love it.
They're inspiring.
So good.
Inspiring books.
So good. My campaign that I want to run that's inspired by that, I'm not going to get into what specifically, but I want to have a party that's a group of monks, and they have to flee their temple. They're on top of this big mountain, hidden away, cloistered, and they're doing their meditation. They have to flee down the mountain before this army catches up to them, who thinks of them as blasphemous, and they're trying to wipe out all the monks. So the whole campaign is them running and getting down this mountain. And their goal is to get to this town, or get to some kind of establishment at the base of the mountain. But I'm like, oh, that would be fun. If you did it right, what?
Are there like towns and cities throughout the...
I don't know. I think I would make it more like maybe have a few towns, but it's supposed to be remote. So have really cool NPCs that the monks can interact with. So there's dragons and stuff, but they're not necessarily, you don't have to fight them. They're more NPCs. And then maybe have caverns. So they need resources somehow. So they can't just run down. They need to gather food and that kind of thing. So make being exposed to the elements and how much food you have more important, because it matters to the story that you're telling. Not
that you should do this, but I picture it just in this idea form as all anthropomorphized animals.
You could do that, yeah.
So it's just, that would be like what they look like, oh, there's a badger, and then there's a fox, and there's a turtle. And it's just, a bunch of monk look, and then the bad guys
animal folk.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could do that. Yeah.
That's just how my brain's picturing it.
It'd be really fun to play against typeware, develop the monk classes where they all have a certain style. Mm-hmm. So maybe you have the crane folk and the badger folk, but the crane folk does snake style.
Right. Their styles are different. Yeah.
The styles are, so there's this cool, it feels a little more dense than just, on the nose, I'm a crane and I do crane style.
Yeah.
Great.
Like,
Okay.
it'd almost be like, what does the crane watch?
Right.
Oh, it watches the snake.
He watches flies alighting on the boulder. I do fly style.
Exactly. It doesn't need, and its style looks like, I think that's a fun idea to that whole, that's fun. Yeah. I would play that campaign.
Yeah. I might do that just next because listeners, our Friday campaign, now that we played Storm King's Thunder, that's all done with. So now we're going to do like little, I wouldn't call them mini campaigns, but shorter campaigns that last about like 6 to 8 months, depending upon, the planning and the size of the story. But I'm not going to get into this one too much because it'd be fun to at least talk about one of our topics. But Ian's running his campaign, and then John, our DM for Storm King's Thunder, is going to do a homebrew. And then I'm going to do a homebrew called Bard Star. Instead of Rockstar, it's Bard Star, where all the characters are bards and they're in a band together, and they're going from town to town playing and leveling up as musicians, and they're trying to get to this battle of the bands. So that's going to be really fun. But my second homebrew, maybe I'll do the Monk Mountain idea. So if people want to hear about Bard Star more, I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't want to get stuck in that mire today.
Right. So it's full. It's ready.
Full.
We're about ready to crack that omelet because we're
about ready to crack the eggs and do the dance.
So let's. Sure. I'm sorry that this took so long, but there was lots of things have happened in the last week since we talked last.
This is the show. The format is I make the notes and then I depend upon Ian to derail it so it's more conversational. Yeah, totally. So
let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about it.
That's beautiful. So I want to preface before we transition that both of these topics, we might not get to both of them today, but both of them are actually kind of controversial in the hobby of D&D. And I'm not here to talk about, I'm not pro or against, but I think they're interesting concepts, and I want to talk about them and talk about my experience and how I'd like to use them and then get other people's input. So again, we're going to steer away from good and bad and just talk about the different sides of these concepts. And again, my opinion is if you don't like something at your table and you're the DM, don't have it at your table.
Yeah.
Just talk to your players and make sure everybody's on the same page. No pun intended. So
I want to add to this real quick while you're talking, like
sure.
Being part of, obviously it's social media groups and seeing subjects get brought up in the D&D communities. It baffles my mind.
Yeah.
How divided people can be about something that is optional in your game. It's like, why do you care? Who cares what they put in their game? Whatever, though. I mean, get mad, post about it. Cool. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And again, we're not here to say, hey, don't get worked about topics. Yeah. We're here to say, for us, it's like, you know what? This is a game, and we just want to tell our stories.
Yeah, we just want to.
We want to play the games that are fun for us, and fun for us as a table. So the community that we have going, everybody that's involved is having fun. Nobody's getting left out or feeling triggered or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion on it.
So what's the I like the one because I actually have seen this come up more recently.
I know we're gonna leave that for a second.
Oh, which one do you think I'm gonna talk about?
You're gonna talk about lines and veils.
No.
Oh, okay.
I want to talk about.
Let's talk about sex. I was like, oh, he's gonna go straight for the jugular.
No, I wanted to talk about the ancestry
and culture.
The idea of races mixing and I think that's awesome. Like having these halves of halves, like a half orc, half drow, like you've used, or you know, these just different versions that were not common.
Right.
I know that. You talk about it.
So there's a book. It's really a PDF. I don't even know if you can order a hard copy of this, but there is. We've talked about it before briefly. There's basically an official homebrew website for Wizards of the Coast and D&D called DM's Guild, and there's tons of stuff on there. There's a ton of free stuff. I think at some point we're going to talk about cool free shit on Roll20 and DM's Guild that doesn't cost you anything, because this hobby is expensive.
Yeah, it is.
It can get out of control, especially if you want, like, sometime we should talk about boutique dice, because that cottage industry is insane to me. That's one of the craziest things.
Well, just dice in general, some of those dice out there, the things people charge for dice,
crazy.
Holy fuck.
Yeah,
and don't get me wrong, those dice that they're selling for that, I drool about them. I dream about them. They look incredible. They're fucking insane.
But don't roll them or they'll break.
Yeah, it's just I still want them.
Right, me too. It'd be fun to be a collector of like gemstone dice.
Yeah, I want to carry them around in my pockets.
Yeah.
All the time.
Assert your dominance as a DM by like having them the $1,000 like fucking crystal dice.
The real baller thing would be to like roll with those dice. Be like, that's how.
God.
Boom! I roll these dice.
You're like one of those rappers who always drink the really expensive champagne.
Right.
Like,
they've got crystal dice and they roll. They roll like 6d6 of crystal dice onto bamboo.
A lambskin.
Oh,
dice tray.
There you go.
And they roll really good, but there's that. It's like they have a 5% chance of like critical fail, so they just shatter. So they roll really good until they. But you're such a baller. You can afford to buy more.
Yeah, you buy more. What do you need?
You have the dice maker on tap, like you have them on retainer.
That's right.
Nobody else can use them. Yeah.
Custom craft you shit. God.
Yeah.
What a life. What a life.
Anyways, that's dice. We'll get back to it at some point. There's a book that's called Ancestry and Culture on there, and it's basically a different way gives you an optional way to build your character than the traditional way. And truth be told, this is the way that 5e is going anyways, and D&D in general. And if you look at most role-playing games, they tend to do, instead of race, they use words like heritage and things like that. And for me, I'm not so concerned about just relabeling things unless it has a different function. And so what do they mean by ancestry and culture, first of all? Well, ancestry is your heritable traits, like what you picked up by being born from your parents, right? So my character Switch was half orc and half drow. So she has certain traits that she'll get, like dark vision and etc. And then culture is what was the culture you're raised in, which to me, that's the really cool part, is I could be a half orc, half drow character that was raised by dwarves, right? And have different things, different cultural skills. Like maybe I'm really good at stoneworking, right? And I have that underground sense like dwarves have because I was, I've spent 80 years in this culture.
Right.
So that to me totally changes the way that I think about my character as I build them. So for me, it's like, ooh, that's really cool. The idea going back that certain races couldn't mix actually goes back to like OG D&D and the mythology that's there, which was most races could only breed with each other except for orcs, which got fucked out of their birthright. And so basically Grumsh, the god of orcs, was like, hey, but you can fuck whatever you want. So it's kind of their god's revenge upon the world, essentially.
Weird.
There's more to it. There's certain things you can find lists. There's a 2nd edition book just about sex. And again, this is kind of a hot button issue. You don't have to include this in your table. You don't have to read it, but it does exist. And it has a whole, I've looked at the tables, all the races that can breed with each other and the ones that can't, and that kind of thing. For me, in my campaign settings, I'm like, look, you're all intelligent humanoid creatures. You can all breed. We're just going to say, scientifically, you'd all be the same species, quote unquote, right. Just for the sake, like you can mix it however you want. I think it's interesting if you have a setting specific reason why, elves and orcs can't breed. There's some problem in that world. That's cool. But having this weird kind of racist, like only these things, that to me personally doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So I don't like using it. And honestly, I never got why there were only half elves.
Right. It's weird.
There weren't even half orcs back in AD&D. It was just half elves. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
And why are they called half elves and not half human? Oh, because human is kind of, we're making human the hub, so.
Right.
For me, I like making weird characters that are a mixture of different things, so that for me that's better from a tension standpoint if I'm telling a story.
Right.
That's just me. And so we're not going to get into the nitty gritty. If people want us to really go through, actually, you know what? I just looked at my note. It might be fun if we have time to actually just start building a character using Ancestry and Culture. And seeing what we come up with. So that's basically the overall view. Some people get really upset by this. They're like, no, you have to do it the traditional way. You can totally do that. You can make legitimate characters. They're great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would say this is, one of the reasons why I switch my half drow, half orc character, I just call her an L orc, basically, like half elf, half orc. But one of the reasons why she turned out so well is because I mixed and matched all this, all the ancestry and cultural traits. So I was able to let my mind go in a different way with her backstory.
Right.
And where did this character come from? How did she get these things? Oh, she's a Tomb Raider. Oh, her parents weren't supposed to get together. Her dad was this gentle giant of an Orog, which are like giant orcs. So he didn't fit into orc society. And her mother was a very vicious drow, but she was rebellious. So they got together and then they just started going to rob tombs. So that's what she grew up in, was this, like, seeing all these different cultures. That would have never come about if I had done it the normal way.
Right.
So I like the results that you get from it. So, but what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, from watching you kind of discover these types of things and seeing my friends play characters and I play characters, when you start like creating a character that's not the norm for yourself, something that's outside of the box for you, it almost, people seem to step more into the role play side of it, because they are figuring that character out, so they role play it a little bit more, even if it is just a tiny bit. What I'm getting to is, sometimes there's something to be said about really stepping out of your comfort zone and maybe having somebody make the framework for a character for you and be like, here, what could you do with that? And then really shaping that and get creative with something that's outside of your comfort zone. It can be really inspiring. It might be really hard and you may not like it.
Right.
But it could also lead you to discover things like the heritage and ancestry, where you're like, oh, this is really cool. And then all of a sudden it inspires you to create something within your own campaign where there's a whole mix of these certain tribes that are half this and half that. And they all kind of, whatever you want to do with it. I think it's fascinating. I love that shit.
Yeah. And, the only way you'll find out if you like this or not, and I feel like a lot of people who get upset by ancestry and culture haven't actually tried building a character that way to see what the results are, instead of just making a value judgment on it, saying, okay, well, let's be, heavy quotes here, scientific, and let's build something and see what result we get, And so my opinion is, if it sounds interesting, try it out and see what happens. Yeah. Build it, play it, and then if you're like, nope, don't like that, adjust it, So there's nothing wrong with starting if you've never played before. You're like, that seems way too complicated. I haven't even made a character. Make a straight up character so you have something to compare it to.
Make a human fighter.
Human fighter.
Boom.
For sure.
Easy.
I
use a sword and a shield. Poof, done. I wear armor. Love it. What do you?
Don't have to worry about spell slots.
Yeah. What's your hair? I have short hair. Boom. Here's your character, dude. What's its name? Bleeg.
What color is your hair?
Black.
Blonde?
Oh, you went blonde. Let's go blonde. Blonde, short hair. His name's Bleeg.
I put a question mark at the end too. What color is it? I don't know.
Blonde, question mark.
Blonde, black blonde.
there you go. There's a character for you. Well, Merry Christmas.
For sure. Merry Christmas.
Maybe it is Christmas for all we know right now. Is it?
It could be. By the time this one comes out, who knows?
Yeah.
So Merry Christmas if it's close to Christmas. And belated Christmas if it's after Christmas.
And pre-Christmaka, Hanukkah is like in like 2 weeks, so it's not
on the doorstep. Yeah,
so it can't be Hanukkah present, guys.
Up.
Sorry.
No, that'll be an episode that already came out.
Yeah.
So happy belated Hanukkah.
Again, or before.
Yeah.
After. One of them.
We're confused. We don't know
cares?
what we're talking about. Yeah.
What's this other thing about things that's controversial? I love controversy, and if you guys get me crazy, I'll start gaslighting everybody because I'm insane.
I found this thing. This isn't like, it's pretty obvious, but it's interesting to me how if you post something or you talk about something now, people assume you support it.
Right.
Like wholeheartedly, you're showing your support, where I don't actually think that's true. I think a lot of times you're just like, hey, this is weird, or hey, that's funny, or whatever. And it doesn't mean mindlessly post or talk about things. But I think with us, it's just like, hey, look, we're not saying this is good or bad, but let's talk about it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I always thought the old way of doing it was kind of boring. So for me, I'm like, oh, cool. I'll use this for sure. But that's just me.
Well, I think anything to enhance the storytelling of something, that's awesome. Like,
right.
Why wouldn't you want to add more to create more story? I mean, like, why not add another variable for people? Who cares? It's story. Right. It's going to be fun.
And like Ian said, if you don't like it, don't use it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, if you're like, oh, that's stupid, you don't have to have it at your table at all. If it bothers you that other people do it, I don't know what to say about that. That's,
you know what?
That's a problem for you, and I'm sorry.
What? If you want, you can come fight me. I live on 411 Elm Street.
I feel like that's not your actual address, and you don't want to fight Ian. He does Muay Thai. You don't want to do that. He's setting you up right there.
Yeah, I am setting you up. Unless, I mean, I don't want to fight either, honestly. I prefer not to.
So we're not going to do a full character build, but let's build the ancestry and culture part of a character. Now, here's the only requirement. I know you're saying no.
I know, Ian, shut up.
It has to be halvesy, so half this, half
halvesies?
that, and halvesies, and then from a different culture. So half tiefling, half halfling from a human culture, that kind of thing.
Well,
I'm gonna pull the book up.
We're doing this together, right?
Yeah, totally.
I got some dice here.
You're not even gonna have to roll, but you can grab them. Are you gonna just do it so you don't have to choose?
No, I was just having them in case we have some sort of dispute that needs to be solved by dice.
Oh, okay.
I like the idea. No, that's stupid. Never mind.
You should probably say it at this point, even if it is stupid.
Yeah. Well, I love Aasimar characters.
Aasimar? Okay.
Yeah,
I think they've got that one in here. So let me just double check. There's no Aasimar, so it's Dragonborn, it's all the standard.
Let's do a half Dragonborn, half elf. What do you think about that?
I think that's great. That'll be a cool mix.
What culture do you think they should be raised in?
Let's say halfling.
That's insane.
I know.
That's so funny too, just because it would be so big compared to them all the time. Always.
Right. And they probably, kind of like a dog that grows up with a bunch of cats, the dog ends up thinking it is a cat. So this really big character always tries to make it small and like stuff itself in small spaces.
Right. Even though it literally, it's the dude, because a halfling would be like up to its fucking thigh.
Right. Maybe it could be a small Dragonborn, but yeah, if it's just a full size.
Well, Dragonborn elf, it's still going to have the traits of something tall.
Right.
So, I mean, 6 feet, maybe 5'11", 5'10", on the short side.
Yeah.
And what would you say, like, it looks like?
So, Well, let's go through because there is a procedure for you pick some stats
Sweet.
from each. So
Sweet.
let's talk about that really quick, and then we will start talking about how it looks because this will help inform us. So let's see. I just have a little blurb from the PDF.
Cool.
That I'm going to read. So the description. So this is character creation, ancestral and cultural traits. The description of each ancestry and culture includes both inherited and cultural traits. So for Dragonborn, you have the cultural traits and then the inherited traits, heritable, and then cultural. So yeah, they're in different sections. Age, size, speed, traits are tied to the ancestry, most likely to be inherited, shared with biological parents, alignment, language, skills, many other stuff tied to culture, blah, blah, blah.
Well, that's interesting. Like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it almost seems like the two concepts could be tied to nature and nurture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what they're saying. And they're also, I mean, again, you might think this is good or bad, but they're also saying that there's a moral relativism because your alignment comes from the culture you grow up in. Instead of saying, hey, all orcs are evil, it's like, no, well, okay. To me, that's just boring. It's like, that's why, like, I love the Drist books, but after a while, it gets really tiresome when every orc that he's encountering is just pure evil,
Right.
you know? But some people consider that super problematic, like to say this whole race of beings is bad and we need to wipe them out. It has certain connotations, obviously, and makes sense to me. So I'm not here to argue politics. I'm just saying that makes sense to me personally. So yeah, that's a good way to put it, is you got the nature stats and the nurture stats. Like you have stuff that comes from your genetics and you have stuff that comes from your upbringing. Let's see. Your character has inherited qualities from biological parents of 2 or more ancestries. So we'll just stick to 2. Perhaps your parents are an elf and human, blah, blah, blah. Characters of mixed ancestry might look almost entirely like one parent or the other, or anywhere on the continuum between them. So do we want them to have a weird mix of both?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what are you thinking?
I'm thinking height and size and build of an elf.
Okay.
But has almost these, they look like they're covered almost in these like scales.
Okay.
Like a dragonborn would be, but they're not like these dark, hardened things. That's very light and like elven and wispy looking.
Gotcha. It might be cool too if they have like a skin pigmentation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That looks scalier, but it's actually, they still have skin, but it's like they have like a reptilian-esque, draconic-esque design pattern all over their skin.
For sure. Love
what kind of dragon are we saying?
I'm partial to black dragons and red dragons, so I mean I'm cool with either of those.
All right, I was gonna say Jim, but let's do red.
I was avoiding that because I mean only, and I'll say why, only because gems and crystals are like such a huge thing in my campaign. Mm-hmm. So like gem and crystal, I'm like, don't bring that up. But no, that was my instinct, was a gem dragon, 100%.
Oh, let's say gem. Yeah, let's definitely say gem then.
Yeah.
So we'll just say for now amethyst, just to have something in there. And maybe they have, I know a lot of the gem dragons, from what I've seen, they have little floaties.
Yeah,
kind of around
the
there.
little stones that kind of rotate.
Yeah, the little stones. So maybe they have one. They have like 1 or 2. So here we go with ancestral traits, age, size, speed, and then dark vision. So you pick 2 of your ancestries from the available options, select a number in between the 2 ages. So you get to pick one of the things. I would say elf. They get to live a little longer.
For sure.
And they have that lifespan, basically.
Yeah. It's most like I agree for sure.
Yeah. Size is obvious. They're going to be medium because both those ancestries are medium. Yeah. Speed is going to be standard. It's going to be 30. As far as I know, I don't think Dragonborn have an extra.
Not that thing. I know of.
And then dark vision. Elves have dark vision, so our character will get dark vision. And then here's additional ancestral traits. You may select one other ancestral trait from each of your two chosen ancestries.
Okay.
So let's look at Dragonborn first. The one I know less about. I know more about elves just because they've been around longer.
Oh, and well, the Fizbins is going to change some of the Dragonborn stuff now, too.
We won't worry about that too much, but
right.
yeah. So the other elf ancestry traits are keen senses, fey ancestry, and trance. I would say trance is a cool one for this character to have.
Yeah, I'd say we could take that one from elf. Let's do the Dragonborn.
Okay, let's find. I think Dragonborn is above because these are alphabetized. There's maybe. There we go, Dragonborn. So Dragonborn has draconic ancestry, which seems like if I'm a DM, I'm going to say, well, you're going to have a draconic ancestry anyway. So we said red, I think, or no, amethyst.
Amethyst.
And I don't know what kind of breath weapon they get.
For now, we'll just call it fire.
So they have a fire breath weapon. So they get trance and they get a fire breath weapon. Already, this is a weird character compared to standard. Like those things don't mix.
Right.
And then what do we say? Halfling?
Halfling. Raised as a halfling.
Raised as halfling. So now we're going to go to the cultural stuff. Let me make sure. I think you just pick the cultural stuff from whatever culture you're in. You can also mix the culture, and they have procedures for that. We're not going to worry about that today.
Fucking halfling. That's so funny.
That's so weird.
Right.
Let's see. Where is it mixed? Here we go. Yeah, so for culture, the way we're going to do it today is we're just going to pick the halfling cultural stuff. There's no
That's funny.
E, F, G, H. So it's after... No, here we go. So, and again, we can say, in here they have the Lightfoot halfling cultural traits. You could always go with a different one, but we'll say that. So, ability score increase. So dexterity increases by 2 and charisma increases by 1. If you mix your cultural traits, if like they kind of moved around, again, you can pick one from one culture and one from the other, but we're just going straight. Alignment, I think they're usually chaotic good,
right?
Is what it says in here. Brave, so you have advantage on saving throws against being frightened. And then you get your languages from that. So you would get common and halfling. So this is a draconic elf person who doesn't speak either draconic or elf. That's a really interesting character base for me.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what I'm talking about, listeners, as far as like making a cool, interesting character where you have a procedural way to mix and match stuff, which for me, that's my bread and butter. I'm like, oh, let me customize that shit and make something really unique for me.
Right.
Let's name this character. Let's give it a halfling name. Do you have your PHB, your player's handbook on hand?
No, but my list of names doesn't have anything that would be a halfling's name. So if I was going to, but I have sorry, I keep bumping my mic, friends. But I have this right here. Hold on.
Okay.
All right. Halfling names, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You want it to be, is this a male or a female?
Let's say that they're gender neutral. Let's get super weird with it. So they can have either or.
All right. No, this is the name.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
Okay.
Angletrude Sandheaver.
Oh, that's good. Angletrude
Sandheaver.
Has a breath weapon, only trances 4 hours a night, speaks halfling and common.
Super brave.
They try to fit in small spaces when they're feeling upset, so that's like their comfort is like
what class is this person? What?
Oh, let's say, what's a halfling shoe-in class? Rogue, but let's say not rogue. Let's say something more community-oriented, so maybe cleric. Like a cleric or a druid, I would say.
Druid, for sure.
Yeah. That's so funny because they have cat-like things, so like they go find a little box.
Even though they're huge.
They have their trance box.
I'm Angletrude Sandheaver.
I feel like we should make them like 6 feet tall.
I feel like they should be like 6'4", honestly.
Okay. They're like Lambert, the cowardly lion, the lion who grew up with the lambs.
Right. Well, he's supposed to be brave.
Right. But I mean, it's like that, like fish out of water, like totally different, but thinks that it's a halfling, essentially. Yeah. That's good.
There you go. There you go, people.
So that was pretty successful, I feel, is that you can make some cool, unique things. So as far as if your interest is being creative, Ancestry and Culture is really cool. Let me credit the author. I should have done that at first. I'm sorry. I always think of names last.
I want to touch on.
I think Jeffrey Yang is the author. There's they have a small publishing company on. I think it's just WebDM, and he's they're one of the halves. So I think it's two people. So
that's cool.
It's cool book, Jeffrey. If you ever hear this, probably won't, but I like it. Super cool.
So I wanted to touch on something real quick because we talked about Numenera.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something about there was basically a rules, not even rules, but like a thing for sex within Dungeons and Dragons, basically from editions ago. Well, there's the same thing in the Numenera books.
Oh, really?
And there's a whole book that talks about having that in your campaign. And again, it stresses the very first few things the book says is, hey, first thing to consider is, do you need this in your campaign?
Right.
Like, is it, if you're just adding it to add it, a lot of players may not like that. Like,
it's going to be really uncomfortable.
Right.
For
Make
almost everybody.
Sure
yeah.
that it's something that's appropriate for your table and that there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
And it stresses that. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Speaking of, Numenera is fantastic if you're looking for even inspiration in D&D.
It's really good. Yeah.
It's the stuff that the books talk about is very much in the idea of, hey, it's like right at the beginning of all of the books, like the first 80 pages are teaching you how to generate what they've generated. And here's how we do this. Here's a lot. And then they go, but here is a bunch of really cool shit we did for you if you want it. But at the very beginning, they teach you how. They give you ideas on what it is to create this world. So
tutorials and templates, baby.
Right. And that's, so if you're looking for inspiration, definitely pick up one of their books. Even if it's just one of their adventures, and just read through it.
Hey, they have a sample PDF you can download for free. They also have a Numenera campaign guide for 5th edition. So they've adapted it for 5th edition too.
There's a lot to be said about, and I've only briefly read it, and I'm very excited to try it out. Just like we were excited to play Blades.
Yeah.
Numenera.
This is another good one.
Oh, wow. It looks so much fun. So much fun.
And I have to say this, I feel like they've already won awards, but for me personally, Blades and Numenera, the design and how concise those books are like, there's nothing that even compares.
Oh, yeah.
Like, as much as I love 5th edition, those books are a mess when you're trying to find stuff. And like Numenera, if it's talking about a subject, in the margins, it will tell you what other pages you can find that subject on.
Like,
so,
here's this and this.
They treat it as a reference, and it's much more user-friendly, even on PDF, which is not user-friendly for cross-referencing. You're doing a bunch of scrolling, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, but it's really good. Really exciting. Inspiration.
By the way, our when we make our own game, we should call it Tutorials and Templates. That should be the name of it.
Tutorials and Templates.
It's like, really fun. I know it sounds boring, but it's really fun. Yeah. You're going to learn stuff, but not in a boring way.
Not boring. We just roll some stuff. But it's super fun seeming. I can't wait to try it, and I'm sure we're going to tell you guys all about it. And
we'll probably tell you it backwards, where we'll be like, oh, that was really fun. And people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Oh, so we did a Numenera game, and this is what happened.
Yeah, it's very player forward, narrative forward, role play, acting out your characters. And when I say that, I don't mean you have to do voices. You just get to be in character.
You're inhabiting your character. You're experiencing that world through them. They're essentially your avatar. I feel like that's much more than video games. Like, your character in D&D or whatever RPG you're playing is the avatar of you. It's kind of an expression of you in this world that is real, at least just for that session. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And very narrative games for people that aren't really just like, you could have your first role-playing game be Numenera or D&D, and I love that kind of stuff. People that just start doing it. They're like, I like stories, and they want to really jump in. So great. Love it.
So, speaking of sex, that takes us to our second topic for today, which is lines and veils. Full disclosure, I have not used this in one of my games yet, but I'm definitely going to. I've just kind of been mulling it over and thinking about it and trying to find the best way to incorporate it, especially because if you're playing with your friends, you know them better, so it changes the dynamic of what this is trying to achieve. So lines and veils is basically talks about consent in gaming, and that's definitely a hot button word now. But it's really it's talking about anything that's kind of like really heavy violence, you know, and especially murder and things like rape and, you know, weird sexual situations. Lines and veils kind of came about so that if you're going to do intense stuff, you know exactly what people are comfortable with and what people are okay with and what they're not okay with. So I have some definitions. What is a line? A line is something you don't cross. Maybe it exists in the world in some fashion, but it never comes up in game. So an example is like the subject of rape is never going to come up in your games. That's not something anybody at your table wants to deal with. And a veil is something where, yeah, it exists and maybe you talk about it, but you metaphorically throw a veil over it whenever it comes up. So like, for instance, we had in Storm King's Thunder, we had a veil. One of our characters ended up getting busy, turned himself giant, went and had a good time with a giant lady, and we didn't get explicit at all. It was happening, but it wasn't really, you know, no like details about that.
Right.
There are actually some interesting forums where you can give them to your players and just be like, hey, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this situation? And nobody else has to see it. It's just for the DM. So they, you know, me as a DM, I know exactly what Ian's okay with and what he's not okay with. And not okay with like, this is annoying. Like not okay with like, I'm leaving the table. I'm never coming back. I'm never playing RPGs again. So, that's essentially all lines and veils is. But again, it comes back to what we've talked about, which is talk to your players.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you don't know them very well, like get to know them or be like, hey, I'm thinking of running like a, you know, Edwardian Dark London campaign about Jack the Ripper. Is that something you're into? Oh, no? Okay. Maybe we should find a different storyline or different campaign setting to play in, because that's going to be pretty rough and dark. And if it is going to be rough and dark, how do you deal with it? What's an appropriate way, again, for your table
Right.
to deal with that?
Well, I think another thing that you may find probably more common in D&D would be like, and this would be one of those things, possibly line, possibly a veil at your table, would be brothels.
Right.
That's like,
how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty common thing in most D&D games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've maybe we have encountered that on a Friday night game. I think I don't even know. But
it might have been in passing, but it's never
right.
been something like no one's like, I'm going to the brothel.
Right. And now that's, again, that has to do with your table, your players. Talk to them. If you're running a group of people that are like, oh, we 100% want brothels. Oh, okay. Well, then we can throw brothels in there and,
right.
you know, make sure everybody's cool with dealing with that aspect of the table.
Right.
And, you know, that's for you and your table to decide.
I think another one that maybe wasn't controversial even 10 years ago, but now I think would be much more, for lack of a better term, triggering for people is slavery.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Is there slavery in your world? Is it a big part of it? How are you dealing with it as a DM? And I think these hot button issues, it's a good opportunity for you as a DM to grapple with these issues through story. That's what stories are good at doing is challenging us and giving us empathy towards others. So it's not to say don't put it in there, but how are you dealing with that? And who's in your table that's might be triggered by that or might have a hard time with it,
right?
You know? So that one, when I read about that first, I was like, wow, that I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know. That seems like a tough one, you know, because that is something just like brothels. And again, historically, this is also true. Like slavery was a thing and is a thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's still going on. So I think there are opportunities to deal with that or not, but in an adult way, in a way that nobody's like having a super traumatic or bad time.
Yeah.
Because Ian and I both know having a bad time at the table can be really bad. It can be really not fun.
Right. It can taint the experience.
Yeah, it can.
For somebody. And you could have had an entire year playing with a table and having the greatest of times. And then in one moment of just a non-communication moment, everything changes and it ruins everything.
And there's definitely big tables that do live streaming where that's happened, like live. And it's not good, you know? Yeah. So yeah, again, the more I think about it, at first I was like, do you really need to talk about it? And I'm like, yeah, especially if you don't know the people very well.
Oh, for sure.
I think you should always do it. Like moving forward, I'll probably do it for my games, you know, that I'm starting up. But I think Lines and Veil shows you that it's not just 15-year-old boys playing D&D anymore. It's actually adults, and we're trying to be more mature about how we communicate with others. And not mature like, oh, I'm so much better, like a way where you're being thoughtful about other people and you're being empathetic and you're saying, hey, this game is about us as a table. It's not about me or you. It's about us having this experience together, you know?
Absolutely.
And that I feel like Lines and Veils is a good way if you're not sure how to build trust. That's a great way to start, is like talk to people. And if people know you as a DM or even as a player, if they can trust you with what makes them uncomfortable and you're not going to just walk all over that, that's a great way to build trust with others and build empathy, in my opinion. You know, so there's not much more to say about this. Let me credit, I actually was looking at the book. It looks really interesting. I didn't know it existed, but Ron Edwards, I guess, originated this concept in a book called Sorcerer. And then there's a colon, Sex and Sorcery. So it's a whole book again about if you're going to have like sorcerers summon demons and have sex with them, here's some guidelines, because it can get really weird and uncomfortable really quick if you're just super explicit about every single thing, you know?
Right.
So, and honestly, this same Lines and Veils exist in all storytelling. So you think about how many movies where the two main characters start to get sexy and then the camera pans away with some like saxophone, brr, 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 and it's panning to the window and then it cuts after the thing. That would be a veil. Like, oh, it happened.
Veil, for sure.
But we're not going to go pornographic with it. Right?
Or even really, it's a subtle wave to it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's all these things already exist in storytelling, but we're making them more explicit for gaming because there's more people playing, and so there's going to be more issues that come up, more people not thinking before they do something, you know? So that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Do you have any thoughts on Lines and Veils? Let's hear your thoughts.
My thought is, I don't have much to say about it. I don't think I've ever had any of my characters have sex while I played D&D.
Yeah, it wasn't really something characters before I wanted to really delve into with those characters. Yeah, you know, that may change as you play more. I think maybe if you're not like a adolescent boy, maybe you grow into that, you know.
Yeah, it's possible. And like Eric said, in the games we played, there's people that have had romantic moments with characters, but never mind. The DM has definitely tried to persuade my character to engage, and he is not cool with that.
Right.
Not Ian's fine with that. I'm fine.
Your character.
My character's not cool with that.
Yeah.
But again, we're familiar with each other. I know my DM. He knows me. He knows that he can push to that degree, and I'm okay with that. Like in game, I'm 100% okay with what was happening.
Yeah.
So that's again, we know each other. There's a line that we both know exists, and I don't think mine's ever been crossed in that sense. So that's all I'd have to say is making sure that you have that communication is really key.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna end out the episode with a little segment we like to call a story time.
Oh yeah, I totally.
Yeah, you forgot.
Totally forgot.
Yeah,
cool.
So this is a holdover from our now defunct podcast. We're not going to talk about the podcast right now, but if people want to hear what that was about and ask us, we'll talk about it. But basically,
but if you don't ask, we're not going to talk.
We're not going to talk about it. It's not important to us. Storytime is this game. It's kind of an improvisational game where we just pick a few kind of starting things, and then we just try to tell a small, self-contained story. So I think today we'll do what we did do in the past a lot, which is we'll use Dan Harmon's Story Circle to give us some constraints, and like we can just, all say one, and then Ian will say one. We'll trade off to get the story, and then the story is complete when we get to the last one. The thing we're going to do is we're going to use a 6-sided die to determine certain things for fun, because why not? Story circle.
Story circle it is.
Why don't we read through the story circle? Because I know it's been episodes. So we'll just talk about the points, because these are what we're going to use as cues for our contributions. We'll each get 4 because there's eight segments. I'll go with the first one. So the reader, or the reader? This one says the reader, but the character is in a zone of comfort. It's the first one. What's the second one?
They desire something.
Yeah. 3 is they enter an unfamiliar situation.
4 is they adapt to the situation.
5, they get what they want.
This is my favorite. Number 6, and they pay a heavy price.
Yep. 7, then they return to their familiar situation.
8's the dumbest one. They have changed overall. They have overall changed from the experience.
Well, something in them's changed. And if you get into story writing, usually it's like there's a fatal flaw and they've worked through the flaw. So something has corrected itself so they can, live better. But, okay, so I have just, again, kind of some things for us to kind of have a starting situation. So we need to pick a person, a place, and then a situation that they're in. And that probably will pertain to like what they want to do. What did you say?
His name's Jerry.
His name's Jerry? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to say the place is a theme park.
Okay. I like that.
And then we need to pick a situation.
Jerry can't find his children.
Jerry can't find his children. So I would say that starts us at the zone of comfort, and they kind of want something kind of thing there. So you want to go first? You want me to go first, or should we roll for it? Maybe roll for it?
Sure, man.
Since this is a role-playing
I hit my
podcast.
mic. I'm sorry.
We'll do D6s.
We've got 1.
Yep. Here we go. Highest wins.
5.
2. You get to go first.
Damn, I thought I was get to pick who goes first because I won.
No, you have to go.
Well, I wanted to roll lower then. That sucks. I lost then.
So all depends on how you look at it.
So,
first of all, because I know you're not thinking about it, you use your DM skills. Let's set the scene a little bit.
That's what my brain was going to, like.
Sweet.
Painting this scene. Jerry's a tall man. Long hair. Bright red hair. Copper, actually. Copper. It's glistening. Long. Past his shoulders. Tall. Muscular. And he's in like kind of it's a standard theme park. I would almost say it's more of a local fair, if you will. So it's a little dirtier. A little bit scarier.
Mm-hmm.
And as he is buying tickets for his wife and children to go on rides, he smiles. He buys a lot of tickets. He turns around and goes, all right, I've got the tickets. And there's no one there at all. The theme park's completely empty.
Oh, the whole thing is empty.
Yeah, and he turns back around and looks, and there's nobody at the ticket booth. And he looks in his hand, and he has tickets. Fresh, clean tickets.
Is that the handoff right there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So Jerry looks around and he starts to notice that the fair looks really run down. It's almost a carnival, and it has this dirty, soiled look to it. Besides the tickets in his hand, which are just brand new, crisp, made out of good, thick paper. And he smells on the air the wafting of fresh dough and cinnamon coming from somewhere. And so he starts to stumble there, and he feels a little discombobulated. He feels a little out of sorts, like he can't really get his balance. And he starts calling out for his kids. Wilbur! Caradine! Philomythia! Those are his 3 kids.
He has his wife's missing too.
His wife's name is Jerry as well. Jerry! And he starts stumbling just instinctually towards the smell of this food and starts stumbling around. And he comes around the side of this big, kind of like one of those kiddie roller coasters, that they have, the really shitty ones. And it's kind of obscuring his view. And he turns the corner and he sees... Hand it off to you.
Well, I'm going to go classic with this shit.
Nice.
He turns around the corner, and it's a giant circus tent. And it's lit up.
Mm-hmm.
It's very bright, considering how everything here has been weird.
Right.
Lately. So Jerry...
In the last couple of minutes lately.
Right. Jerry looks down at his tickets, looks up at the moving spotlights and the lit up huge circus tent, and notices right at the entrance there are 2 clowns kind of doing a slow dance, making a little, I don't even know, like their hands are kind of moving through the air. They're just staring at Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
He's still pretty far off, so we can't tell too much about him, but they definitely look like red, white, and black clowns. It's very classic looking clown shit.
Okay. You handing it off?
No, not yet.
Okay.
So Jerry kind of tucks his hair, his copper hair, his beautiful locks behind one of his ears. He goes, Jerry, are you? I hate clowns. And he just starts walking forward.
Okay. That's the handoff?
That's the handoff.
And he feels his fear of clowns mounting. He feels this pressure building in his chest. And it feels like one of his many anxiety attacks that he takes medications for. And with shaking hands, he reaches into his jacket pocket to get his meds, and they're empty. No meds in there. And he starts to, tears start to come out of his eyes, and he starts to shiver and shake, and he's just terrified, but he knows for some reason he has to get into the tent, and he has to pass by these guardian clowns, and then something snaps, and he's like, fuck it. And he starts copying the clowns and doing their dance and mirroring them. And he starts to feel a little better. Like he's like, maybe I can do this. And when he gets close, about 20 feet away, he notices to his left, there's a little table. And there's makeup on the table. And he got the white foundation, and there's a little clown nose. And he notices on the ground next to the table, there's a clown suit. So he suits up. He can't see, but somehow he has the confidence to put the makeup on, and he puts the nose, fashions the wig, puts on the onesie, zips it up, and then moves towards the entrance of the tent, handing it off.
Oh, so as he approaches the tent in his fantastically done clown costume.
Immaculate.
The clowns are still going back and forth. And as he gets within like reaching distance of him, they both stop, turn to him and go, "Tickets, please." And he looks down at his hand, and he has that roll of tickets, and he just sort of shakingly hands it to one of them. They take it, and they both smile, smiles that go a little bit too big, just a tiny bit. And they kind of signal and open the tent for him, and it's blackness in the tent. And he walks in, scared. You know, that whole thing is going on. He walks in, and he sees his children and his wife. And they're seated in the audience, watching the show. It's a lion tamer. It's like the old, 50s or 40s lion tamer with the
top
whip.
hat and the whip.
And the
What's the lion's name?
Pinnacle.
Pinnacle?
Pinnacle.
Okay.
So the down Pinnacle. Then Jerry sees his wife and goes, Jerry! And she looks over at him with a hauntingly dead stare and goes, do I know you?
Is that the handoff?
Yep, that's handing it off to you.
Okay. So she looks over and says, do I know you? And he's kind of shocked. And he kind of shakes his head out, trying to maybe I didn't hear right. He goes, Jerry! And he looks back over and he realizes that Jerry, his wife, and his kids, who he knows the names to, but I don't remember. I think one of them is named Caradine.
Something like that.
Philippa, yeah. They're all dressed in clown suits. And in fact, the whole audience is dressed in clown suits.
Oh, no.
And then I guess the ringleader, the guy with the whip, I don't know what he's called.
That works.
He suddenly, he hears the ringleader, Jerry does, the man Jerry, not the woman Jerry. He hears the big booming voice of the ringleader goes, there he is! And he turns and he sees the ringleader pointing right at him, right at Jerry. And he's like, me? And he's kind of taken away because now everyone is silent. They're all looking at him, and he realizes everyone is dressed like a clown, including the ringleader and the lion.
Oh, no.
And they're all staring at him. And so he slowly walks in because he can feel them waiting for him to do something. He doesn't know what. And it feels like it takes forever. One foot in front of the other. Clump, clump, clump. And he finally makes it to the center, and then there's a little titter of laughter. And he looks around, and everyone's pointing at him, laughing. And it's his worst fear come to life. People making fun of him being a clown. And it feels like it goes on forever. And he kind of breaks down in the center. He holds his head. He's like, no, please. And then suddenly it all stops. And he looks, and then everyone is back to just normal audience. And they're all looking at him with this little glint in their eye. And they start to applaud for him. Yay! And the ringleader comes up and shakes his hand. He's like, you did it. You faced your fear. I'm handing off to you.
And as he shakes this person's hand, the ringleader with the top hat, he looks the person in the eye. And it's him. It's Jerry. And he wakes up in his bed, sweating. It's a little puddle of sweat around him. His wife is next to him. I don't know, the kids are somewhere. It's in his home. His heart is beating. It's cold now. The wind, the slight gust that's in his house for some reason blows, and he gets a chill. He looks over, sees a lion outside. The lion looks in at him, and he realizes, I'm the lion.
Realizes what?
I am the lion.
I am the lion. Nice.
I am the lion.
I am the lion. Is that
That's
the
it.
handoff?
That's it. That's the end.
There's one more thing.
Oh, I thought that was him
You're
returning
at 7.
home.
Yeah, I was, and then I do 8.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine though. I'll take it. So he turns to his wife, realizing he's a lion, and then he goes, babe. And he probably sounds like this as a lion. Rawr, rawr, rawr. Somehow she seems to understand him, and she turns over. She says, "What? What? What?" And he says, "We need to get clown suits." And that's the end.
That was different than I thought we were. That changed so many times. I didn't know where we were going. It was good.
That's the point. That's creating a story out of those little shifts, natural plot shifts. So there you go. Love it, hate it, don't care. There's our story time.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that every once in a while. And that's kind of a good DM exercise.
Yeah, it's just
I try to tell a story, especially emergent, because I don't know what Ian's going to do, and Ian doesn't know what I'm going to do, and we probably don't know what we're going to do until
I didn't even
the moment arrives.
None of that. I
didn't know clowns were coming into it. Yeah.
When he was like, and then he comes around the corner, I was like, there's going to be a clown tent, obviously. Duh. What else could
What else exists at carnivals? Come on.
Well, I mean, it could have been just like a trailer that a dude's making bread in, and that could have changed the whole story into a whole other weird thing. And who knows? I don't fucking know.
For sure. So that is, I think that's a good place to end it right there.
Yeah,
one thing I forgot to mention just about lines and veils is there's a website called adventurerules.blog that I also use as a resource, so I'll link to that and put all that stuff in the doobly-doo. But yeah.
Doobly-don't?
Doobly-don't? Doobly-doo. That's the question. Any last doobly-doo thoughts?
Yeah, I got a thought. Lots of thoughts. But my first thought is, last night I woke up. This morning I woke up earlier than I wanted.
All right.
So I went back to sleep.
Nice.
Stay sweaty.
Stay sweaty. Oh, hey, listeners, you've made it to the end. Give yourself a prize. Maybe a little cupcake or some coffee or hot chocolate, This is the credits, and we have links to all the things. So check down below, and you'll see things to the link tree, and the link tree links to the other links, and there's links to be had. Also, Jerry did our music. It's super badass. If you want to check out all his stuff, we have a link to that too. It's on SoundCloud. So remember to roll high and take a point of inspiration. Like, share, subscribe.